Alison, thanks for joining us. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks for having me, Mary. I'm Alison Contrera. I'm a summer associate at Bond Schoeneck King, and I'm a rising third-year law student at the University of Buffalo School of Law.
So as Alison knows, this interview is part of the New York State Lawyers Response to the Pandemic Project, which is organized by the Historical Society of the New York Courts. And last summer, around this time, we conducted some interviews with some individuals at that time that were in similar positions to Alison. And this year, we decided to speak with Alison to share her experience with us and let us know how things have perhaps changed since last year, and just kind of walk us through where she's been and where we see ourselves going. So, Alison, you said you are a rising third-year law student. So when the pandemic first started in March 2020, where were you in your law school career?
I was a first-year law student in the middle of my spring semester.
Okay, so you had completed one semester at that point?
Yes, 1.5.
So what did the shutdown look like for you? I mean, how did that experience go for you in that second semester in March 2020?
Well, it was a big change because I had already established my routine for the second semester. I was going to the library at a certain time. After class, I was studying for a certain amount of time afterwards on campus. And when we got notice that classes were no longer going to be held in person, it was shocking. I remember we were in our legal writing class and the professor announced to us that we won't be returning to campus, and everyone was like looking around shocked, like, how are we going to do this? We're still first-year law students. What's going to happen? Are we going to have classes still? And we did get guidance very quickly on that. However, it was all virtual from that point, and I do recall there being many discussions about grading, because we were halfway through a semester, and ultimately the university decided to grade everyone on a pass-fail basis instead of letting the students decide. All law students were graded on a pass-fail scale.
How did you feel about that, the pass-fail mandate?
I felt that it was the most fair because everyone was left in differing positions. Some of my classmates were forced to move off campus back home. Some have families with young children that they had to care for because the children weren't allowed to go to school. I felt that it was most fair, but it was upsetting because my final memo was due a week after that decision was made. So I had worked all semester on this final paper, and then to know that it was going to only be graded on a pass-fail basis was upsetting, but it's the most fair.
So what did the summer look like for you after that?
Fortunately for me, I was able to work at Gibson, McCaskill, and Crosby, and I worked, they divided it up into 2 shifts, 2 different teams. So I was on the blue team, and we would work either Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we would alternate with the red shift. I was very fortunate to secure and actually work at a place for the summer. A lot of my friends, even if they were working for free in a nonprofit, they were not given the opportunity to work during the summer because of the pandemic.
On the alternate days when you were not assigned to be in the office, did you work remotely?
I would do research assignments remotely. However, I wasn't given access to their computer system or their files. So it would just be work that it was primarily research that I would do. It was nothing like with client files.
So after the summer wraps up, with your kind of hybrid model job, I assume you went back to school in the fall?
Yes, and
what was that arrangement like?
One of my courses was in person, but it was very different. We were not in the law school building. We were in an undergraduate classroom that fit about 400 students, but we had to limit it to about 60 students, and we all had to stay 5 feet apart. There were certain desks that were designated for students to sit, and the whole classroom feeling was different. We weren't allowed to approach the professor at the beginning or end of class. We had to use sign-in sheets. We weren't allowed to like pass around a paper anymore. The whole atmosphere was just different because people were scared. We didn't know each other's comfort zones. We were scared to talk to our friends or get too close because we didn't want to get in trouble. We weren't allowed to have water bottles or any sort of food during class because it put other people at risk potentially. So it was just completely different.
I'm assuming everybody was masked the whole time.
Yes, no one, some people had the opportunity to participate in class remotely. However, it was evidence, so it was encouraged that you would attend in person. If you felt sick, of course, the professor would excuse you and allow you to attend virtually, which was, I felt that that was a great option for students to have at that time.
Were your other classes fully remote besides evidence?
Yes, they were.
Okay, so that was the fall semester, and then was the setup the same in the spring, or was there more in-person attendance, or what did it look like?
I'm not completely aware. I think some courses were offered in person. I participated in the New York City program in finance and law, which is typically held in New York City, but because of the pandemic, I had to participate in that program virtually.
Okay, and so that brings us to summer 2021, which is your summer here at Bond, Schoeneck and King, and I can tell you that the summer experience this year looks quite different than what our summer associate worked through last year. So she was in the office most days, but most of the attorneys were working remotely. So she really didn't see really any of the attorneys in the office like on a day-to-day basis because we're still on a mostly remote model. So things, I mean, at least from my perspective, are different from you. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what it's been like to work at Bond as far as getting back to normal, hopefully post-COVID times.
Well, I feel that, well, first of all, I'm lucky that we have shifted back to having the ability to come into the office. I have gotten to know a lot more attorneys being in person rather than virtual. I think as a law student, it would have been a little bit more difficult for me to network and get to actually know my colleagues had we been working remotely. I've noticed at Bond specifically, we do utilize different forums like Teams to discuss and communicate with each other. We do have in-person conversations, but sometimes it's easy to send like a chat in Teams or to Zoom or Teams each other to communicate because it's convenient, it's efficient. Some of the people who are still working from home, we can still keep in touch with them and make it feel that they are in the office, even if they are not. So my experience this summer has been vastly different because people have adjusted. Zoom isn't a foreign concept anymore. I feel that most people have adjusted to the Zoom setting and communicating professionally over Zoom. I have loved my experience so far, and I think that there are certain things from this pandemic that we can take with us.
I think that is probably a good place to end. Thank you so much for joining us, Allison, and we appreciate you being a part of this project.
Thank you so much, Mary.